Oh, love that.
They, I don't, it seems pretty obvious that they go for T. But then the one I read something like just over a minute. They kind of answer.
Are you?
Because on base they only extended to circumvention. And
Are you the judge for this round?
No.
Oh, okay.
It's just a big story.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically up to 10 minutes.
I mean. Do you have a foreign computer?
Yeah.
Do you like it? Maybe I should transfer.
A lot of people I know.
But that's a little awkward.
Here's what is so Christian and Sean flow on paper, right? But the sophomores, Nathan flows on here and Julian flows.
How do you like give it to AC where you've got your talk?
Well, that's actually 2AC is probably pretty easy to do. You go up your flow, you get alt tab, and now you're on. I mean, it's like your first flow.
Site replay
You have to tilt it back. You have to,
YouTube.
Yeah, but what's the channel?
Oh, it's I'm gonna post it in the Facebook group. It's just Aiden Kane is the name of the channel. So the high school debate Facebook group.
Right. If you, after that, you're that. And then your partner could also call it. It's very much easier to play off of. It's got fits.
Hey, y'all want food or water or anything like that?
Are we going to do that for this now?
Yeah, but I can bring some back for you.
Really?
Would you rather just walk to Chipotle after?
Just walk? Where do I sit?
Whatever. Just
Okay.
let me know.
Yeah, sure.
Are y'all speaking from there?
Oh, yes, no, maybe so. Kevin, where are we speaking from?
I'm gonna speak from here, if that's all right.
From there.
I don't know.
There's like a live stream? Or like...
Oh yeah.
I've got like no battery.
Okay, I'll just move the thing around then.
Okay.
I'll just be proactive for once in my life.
This classroom building is not really bad.
Make sure
Right.
No, nobody is, I think. Nobody is for sure.
Good luck, y'all.
Yeah, like, do you have any opinion? Alright, here. Right, zero.
Tasha. No mercy.
Oh, sorry. So I asked that comments be disabled for the live stream.
Yeah, I'll do that on this.
Thank you.
Did he mean like the chat room or just comments on the video?
I think both.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought it was the latter. Yeah, I'll do that. Is the judge even showed up yet?
I don't think so.
Oh shit.
What is it? Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Are you gonna need both of those?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you gonna need both of those plugs?
Oh, no, it's just one.
Are you the judge?
Yeah.
I'm live streaming this round. Would you be comfortable with me live streaming your decision as well?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'm sitting next to people and I don't know who. It's not, there's not a Peninsula bossy here, is there?
There unfortunately is not. Prom at Peninsula is today, so
Oh,
everybody is celebrating and
so like maybe this might be the first time I've judged you without like 8 Peninsula sophomores and freshmen around.
I mean, they are, but you have to admit, they're pretty cute. They're rambunctious.
What else you said, let me know when everyone's ready, so we can get started. Okay, are we good? Yeah, you're good.
Contention 1 is public charge. Historical decision-making in immigration has been structured by ableism. Public charge has been the basis of tool with Sujan 805. Which represents the immigration laws to review of defects, understand, identify defective immigrants, and nation that are key immigrants. The defective was actually stabilization on computer, unsafe driver, that's for the aviation regulation law 1882, and the British public charge was question, and encompassing business disability criteria, so safe for something China. This could be the same all government immigration public charges to the following and roads, center bottom of the commission, because of office, have to physical social environments, which are consideration of normal immigration law commission with the PDP line standards, mystery law computer generation, is that like become desirable, and also be like trans, article, these offspring, Trump's recent expansion of public charge of Bradford and disability for those relying on welfare. This session of the eugenic history and immigration was 017. The attention of things that were attacking the disabled, the ninth mentally disabled, to the role of disabled, emergency eternally. It was disabled, emergency society, was very strong, because all disabled people in society, and as he used to say, impaired, the eugenic particular selected to journal missing license, not the goal staples, shocks, things are over. Was the doctor disabled, emergency, just kind of emergency, able to cast that ignored. That's not that disability entails dependency, manifesting logic eugenesis, further show the undesirable immigrant, as one of drains welfare as a matter of society, being 16. Definitely not the CC when I'm sure back, because I don't understand whether it's student because they're not the environment's effect or any features in the deputy or social dependence, or I think she would discipline other dependency being a child, also deputy or potential dependency, and respond to managed support, agency, or the families, regardless of employment, approaching dependence, and everybody people test or evidence that actually show that deputy or those disabled people were like that to be dependent. This results in immense psychological violence. And Grammar 18, the DH is really public charge rule for this 24 million affecting trauma is not to even already not to immigration policy with commercial oversight, redefining acceptable immigrant, restricting legal direction by immigrants all living in the U.S. means a more difficult decision than parent apply for stabbing with you with a chance of staying not applying me, see your family go hungry. This historical trauma eugenics, cumulative and systematic genocide in 1113. The term historical trauma is not collecting emotional psychology group of people across generation following Catholics and missing genocide. The discipline community is doing historical trauma that drives hand advice and misorientation by the medical side of the community's life and disability and weapon destruction and this kind of attempting the policy to take advantage of the whole development eugenics movement, civilization, forced sterilization, immigration laws, optics to the moral and physically deficient and sterilization laws who are applied to the reproduction mentally defective people say that 65,000 Americans were mostly sterilized on this basis suicide the daily kind of emergency people eliminated also the wise secure war for society laws and ability to save whatever this the parent and the parent and all children purchase giving the protection and safety of the children or imagine doing a good thing by making another person's law that on convenience store to essentially giving you utility with ethics. Thus the plan United States federal government should eliminate the public charge restriction on illegal immigration, eliminate the public charge restriction on lawful permanent residence laws passed in 95, also individuals may adjudicate public charge policy caution against imposition of restrictions that alien access to public benefits, criminal restrictions are against good public policy, good public living alien access to qualified lawful permanent residence or inhumane policy leaders, while to answer for the public charge law itself right to legal violence against immigrants only overturning itself as a rebel like 19. Legal violence probably good immigrants name was human access to repatriate legal languages using label immigrants as criminals, immigration facilitates symbolic violence and social issues as exploiting the Americans discriminatory education system that resident provided psychological process encourage people to accept responsibility for their solidarity, immigrants internalize lessons of exclusion plan these mechanisms that legal violence is role central law and private legitimacy structural violence against immigrants law turns violence against socially acceptable understanding and moral practice that harm immigrants precisely they broke the law. No one means ruling on equal protection that solves with our deportation. Ham and 18. The intersecting alien is welfare law theorem is to not single public benefits from the 1996 legislation change the federal state immigrants action public benefits and status immigrants replace outside the welfare state team to the action that ABS immigration status great to government immigrants qualified non-qualified immigrants and legal immigrants good non-qualified public benefits the federal law now brought to fear to immigrants receiving benefits and 5 years qualified status here in disparate treatment and state law like you see that federal law and the suspect classification of the 14th amendment the classification rates considered individual discrimination or restricted judicial scrutiny conduct not so confined to constant actions by only sort of a rational basis review court is all the protection classifications discrimination action rule from the desire to limited welfare benefits being all court rejected. Open to resolve this question whether further make a more differential rational basis about knowing the legal and immigrants know the children be eligible for benefits. Appearance that required documentation of the third by third deportation without full benefits because children go through here. No service increasing severe hunger and English is eligibility to solve the non-qualified naturalized immigrant adults and every decide the purchasing a full benefit and negative consequences or immigration status. Contention 2 is framing sessions v. Maya Thumbs King 18. Being considered Supreme Court immigration case which reported with the moral level justice and value deportation. This is the highest security site in the media. Trump was not peaceful alarmist warning declaring the non-nation to be a safe and criminals decision shut down whether or not the deportation demise and Madison court shut down immigration laws not happening in American history courses was not federal powers to due process of law and the statute gives civil no district and private justification eliminating due process of deportation require more stringent standards so that kind of civil criminal statute otherwise courses attacking the civil criminal decision is a site sharp and a site administrative state just relation come very quickly toward arguments and variety sessions even if political liberalism currently excludes the disabilities during discussion questions that implementation can arise and appealing on its worst but down on 13 abandoning language political justice not too well enough for those individuals disability comes with versus the only way to reconcile to political liberalism with or to disabled this question when the answer was why should we hold political liberalism rather than endorsing a different model that is made into which to disable political liberalism is compelling in this watching it's important because it creates legitimacy abilities to show the basic concepts that are perceptible to each individual political liberalism and also to the justice gives individuals with disabilities is recognized as mentally disabled must be protected by law assume all solvency is zero if they can't mobilize power for 17 constitution problem for the problem to solve requires involved powers that are unprecedented administrative capacity to solve a transnational problem same and the only active by legitimacy and efficacy which are political authority condition will come opinion for realization or theory can be viable only to that we can identify an efficacious political power valid descriptive theories are essential prerequisite to the emancipatory critique Jones 4 it's my critiques and response to acknowledging power the truth protecting as we should be seeing the ideas of the basis which provides the objective reality there or if the colonials and essential to law your century and resolved in all the commitments that come into the corrective of laws and knowledge is not only the other which elaborate the critique opportunity to see that epistemology international law some debates over reformism is good especially in immigration when 17 demonstrate a few ideas of reform the left right is an immigration is inherently good but has no actual idea immigration is very desirable how it ought to be regulated every argument limiting immigration is the wealthy countries all these species idea that we can't take more people alive. We can't run more open immigration system overnight. We're attacking how much time we shall to build this union with the law. Some other people say that it's not figuring ways to best. I disagree. We want other people making repairs to legal atmosphere. The relationship or legal changes they might have slightly unsure the people who are eligible to immigration leave are from getting it. It's not making a huge difference in nearly 1 in 5 field. Immigrants have no access to legal immigration that widely known even among the liberals. Making the secure mandatory lowers number of bills or Congress. Democratic parties start publicizing this is a major problem. Role experimentation orients our politics through micro-political disruption fails and closes off interim games. Comment 13. Interim agenda is basically focused on we must be involved in the experimental politics. State action intersect the goal should be intersect the political acceptance. The same as play a role in relation to climate life consumption and investment in responsive public expenditures. So if you use these in your low markets, you not by new fashion or job activity, economy, interim possibilities, electoral votes are important. Pessimism is and citizens. The point is that to wait for revolution. Things are too urgent. People are stopping now. You can activate little strategy, experimental shifts in universities, action, and cross-state citizen action. The state is inevitable. Even if we don't engage the state, it'll engage us. Choke 16. So we're going to engage with the state on the basis of engagement. Only replicate hierarchies. The state of advance in political action is a power so that on the state when you refuse to engage, make demands on the state and endorse. We are all involved in state policy because there's some anticipate power. Reform is something up. And so tacit acceptance in liberal politics, but not whether we engage, but how. Bringing our policy down managing the exclusion of political action. The strategy must be set within a certain context. Active defense of state service, not to be no reform, compromise, and safeguarding the gains of class struggle. They pathologize oppression. There's no single symbolic word engaging in politics. Incorrect visions and liberal investment phrase 13. Ideas are massively excluded and psyches are dropped from the fundamental possibilities from studying historical specific practices. Through which the description of reduces. Not the key said identities are fixing alter over time, which shifts in practices. Cultural authority negotiating contesting eventually political practice were values and power to realize cultures of human political disengagement. The church is bound to be supposed in the kind of theory. The modern object matching social practice and context right question of practice agency and the sovereign king and not illuminated process by which Japanese security contesting the knowledge that view that extension of foundation among social beings by reducing discourses and policies and that the model evacuates agency complicated practice and what is only attitude determinism is orderly condition dominance now appearing unbearable and submerging expanded inevitable not channel the autonomous model of psychological inheritance and can dictate culture the homogeneity barbecue diverse practice and model thing is symbolic order tribal quality divinity that is essentially humanity condition practice erasing possibilities which indicate that risk collapsing into tautology and really question about how the authority dominant groups establishing an essence there's simply a simple use of universal discourse no modeling that when I even see alternative perspectives and always blocked political practice. Trump was the necessity of engaging institutions, totalizing critiques and modernity can't restrain excessive right-wing forces. Claudius was seen. It was seen against intellectual nothing to do with Trump. Intellectual accountable to criticism to be able to offer and defile the laws. They were reliant on the same moves that reject legal form and intellectual find open small revolutions and activities and really opportunity to liberalism to bigger divorce from reality, such thing improvements, hopelessness, as immediately started the class of journals to building. They are believe school optimism to active analysis and Trump is argument the system is broken, academic anti-liberalism not so combined with it was so new level of boxes feeling perfect, bare minimum tolerance, device xenophobia and hatred, the arguments and logic imagining who be different world.
Or the card of world.
Good? Yeah, cool. What is the 1AC's relationship to the political effects of the app?
We think the United States federal government should reduce the public charge.
So what does it mean for the judge to vote affirmative?
That the United States federal government should reduce the public charge restriction.
So it's the plan is a good idea.
We think the United States federal government should reduce the public
That is
charge
not
restriction.
answering the question, you said the same thing.
Well, the judge's referendum is on whether the public charge.
So it's a question of
should.
scholarship that the plan introduces.
Well, what does that mean?
That
How do you
these
vote on
practices-
scholarship?
How do you
Like, we-
vote
we
on
say
something
that-
that's not gonna happen? Anyway,
What?
The Coppell evidence is in the context of neoliberal markets.
how does the reading of the 1AC impact the revolution that it cites at the bottom of the card?
We don't claim any internal link between the apps.
So you will not have any movement offense based on the
Well,
reading.
if you make a link to the app, like sort of a seeding from state institutions, then we'll say that like that is bad.
Okay. The Frege evidence says to mobilize power. I have two questions. First is that is the state the only actor that can mobilize this power?
You'd say that the state is the most viable method because it has the most application for solutions that would be able to viably
And
engage.
what does it mean to mobilize power?
Well, in the context of public charge, currently the federal government has control over the public charge restriction, and the most viable way to reduce it is through the federal government.
Okay. The last piece of evidence you read, name drops Berlant says that we should not believe in cruel optimism, but rather that hope could happen. What's the distinction between hoping that something could happen in the future and the cruel optimism that the card cites?
What?
It said that they argue or believe in
Yeah.
cruel
The
optimism.
app is a contingent solution to a problem, and we should
It says
address
this kind
optimism.
of overarching belief in cruel
Yeah.
optimism, or the idea that we can't make incremental reforms is bad because it locks in status quo oppression. The idea that we can't solve problems, therefore we should give up, is a notion that we should not accede to.
Okay. The Fraser evidence says that we should default to a mandatory political practice. What examples will the 1AC defend of a mandatory political practices
The
that
1AC.
have
The
power?
United States reducing the public charge restriction.
That's the only thing.
Well, I mean,
That's
that's
the
what
only
we
thing we
have.
have to defend.
Okay, cool. The descriptive theory card. What descriptive theory of the world can explain why anti-black violence happens, or why Diallo was shot 41 times?
We have no, the one is to not present a theory.
So
just a theory on the public charge restriction.
yeah, so the descriptive claim card is specifically about how we should analyze how the world works. What is the one
We
issue?
should analyze it based on contingencies, not an overarching theory of the way the world
So
functions.
that's my
There
question.
is no one theory of the
So the
world, that
concept,
is the
yeah,
card.
So my question is, what contingency can explain why these instances of violence
A
happen?
litany of contingencies explain why each instance of violence happens, but we think that we are here to present the 1AC. We have done that. It is not our burden to present, contingencies that explain the rest of the world.
Okay, the running evidence says that debates over reformism are good, cites like some high school study. What about reading the plan enacts any like political project, or why is it, then if in the case it's just a question of if the app is a good idea?
I mean, if you want to link that the app is reformism, then too, that's good.
Okay.
I sent it, it's just one more.
What's the underlying case?
Not one.
Sorry?
There's no case.
Oh.
Tell me everyone's good.
Okay.
You good?
This debate is structured by an arc of reduction built on the axis of black subjugation, responses to the resolutional question, prefiguracy, argumentative protocols like crowd, anagram, or suffering that can speak to the violence that repetitionally destroys black being, the rhetorical form of the one system its energy into modalities of humanist redress that are parasitic on black suffering as solution. Asking the power to pose the questions, greatest power calls the way the questions must be cannot be reconciled with the outcomes of the question is always posed on an arc of reduction since it is punishment of free association. The increasing way of citizens, the movement to represent from the equilibrium to equilibrium with the third with the interpreter of narrative is the movement of reduction, which is exactly the punishment to be restored, movement from equilibrium to equilibrium to equilibrium restored. Is that the center of optimism, optimism is not an offering historical redemption for the restoration of bodies and need to produce a critique of the rhetorical structure of those of interpretation as to what they are unable to say about the violence. That's subjugation of positions of black and white. They need black and slaves to be outside of the lens of interpretation of the rhetorical structure of demand as the demand of debate. The protocols are already ideologically, this is not a matter of question. The important is protocols. Protocols are ideological questions which preclude the investigation of something in order for black suffering. In order for black suffering to be a part of the debate question, we have to go through circle measures to look like the suffering of some other group. The one of some alternative narratives of real imaginary redemption structure around the question of how to relate something that didn't happen before. Well, with respect to black, you can also the story of being before, you can also the story before the invasion of the district. Without that, you have to need a repetition as opposed to redemption. Reductive theorization is not only theorizing the optimism, it's a meta critique of the reality to show how pure and simple relations are dependent upon using Western parasitic because the politics of integration operates through a discourse of criminology that's dependent on the ontological position of black woods. Anti-immigrants versus fundamentally criminological students come well versed in misperceptions of immigration as students come well versed in misperceptions of immigrants from like the Western disease and condition possibility. The bodies of immigration continue to live through a criminality. We can train up for discourses of progressive mass in which people see immigrants in the United States illegally. There's no way to the essential Western criminology without sustained examination of black system. Also, in particular, is and so black position and providing parameters for tricky issues in immigration, like honest historicity, metaphorical, logical, scaffolding, debates about immigration, investment in political strategies, creates a cool optimism for black people through narratives of part of the plane to the of time that forces them to invest in the pursuit of their own death as warrant. I think the politics of positives rule opposite black promises that always like the obligation to pursue the very anti-black system of polarized and welcoming continued political hope. We see the offers for certain strategies, delimiting the action, including the act of learning with the political and demonizing, critiques of politics of hope, as equal to the end of the office of life, and terrifies with general alternative. The politics of hope that is depends on the necessary production of policy justify the existence of social scholars, exclusive political democracy, illusion of a different order and future tendency trait. Of temporary pursuit policy, the only couple of an anti-black and negative state action is a facade of ambassador to conclusion that tethers civil society's elasticity as under black expungible as Wilson. And 10. The creative emancipatory discourse of modernity, particularly the grammars of suffering through slavery and the one given both the story of necessity and the struggle of political discovery. The human was more monopoly, where the black human blackness is the political tragedy, elasticity, civil society, the way in expansion, several elastic enough to experience the anti-black catalyzed expansion of political imagination of civil society is enabled by the functionality of the same metaphor. The less unable conditional state becomes the alternative is active passivity. The alternative for hyper negativity refuses questions of political feasibility and liberal choice in favor of changing the coordinates of politics so as to pose a demand in excess of any present imagination. After pessimism is an ethics of the real, which insists on abolition as the foundation for ending the world as barbar. At 67, is there a way to think about us in a different hope than us? Cannot take away the constant aggregation of negativities inseparable from the demand, which is so much bigger than exists, and there is rigidity, aggression of the demands of fully if one means the dignity of this demand is supposed to an expectation of realization by investment the nature of the negative size, not whether the demand is realizable, whether why the demand must be thought to within be limited by the terms of realizability. The question posed by an aspect blackness seems to emerge as consistently universalizing the universality or a demand of access or a demand of access of any present imaginable realization. The absence of a terminal to the demand, also the absence of a terminal and calculable such to the point where I would complain. Abolition is the interminable radicalization, radical movement, focus on ethics, relocation, and travel the endowment. Word movement, these that were contemplated at Mary Charles, on Mary Charles, kind of construction of black to internal time of personal, of meaning within personal life, the real is a matter of not life, the incapacity is the type of activity which forms life, with the non-life, which is what it is. Common law being is active, but that doesn't mean that our being is always in an action way. In our personal and mental something about activity, the tension between active and passive provides the ground for symbolic and material reproduction of difference, a restructured sexuality class and blacks and white was phenomenon is mentioned the equal locality, but as the political mental health condition, my option will be the permanent, because the choose or action passivity phenomenon, no longer see action per se, but rather decision, the moment that rather than being forced towards and hallucinatory whiteness towards whiteness, we notice it can be made within the force of what would improperly design freely towards passivity towards social look like I said, is there such thing as radical passivity yet? In ensuring dramatic participation, we are actively all trying to make sure that nothing will relation to friction, critical steps will drive to passivity to increase the participation of not prefer to lose right for true activity act that will change the coordinates of conflict shooting more the less you try to worth to think about. It's worth thinking about this is the Trump era going to have the ongoing reactionary campaign benefits from and requires imagery of protest as alternative factual evidence supporting narrative white victimization and oppression of black power and the conflictual transliterations of the antagonism from the land where it reaches out of the heartland to the transformation of the borders the inflation not only absorbs system but also solves institutions on the efficiency of the present movement where the transformation into movements of black lives that raise the question of how to introduce a dimension into the existence of the groundless or basis parties does not pursue the margin of power to want to find a recourse on the foundation to the recourse to foundation for strong critical resource and into the situation from nowhere and in particular this is not merely a theoretical exercise. Instead, Afro-pessimism as a living and breathing text functions as a clarifying grammar which sharpens critical tools for translatable practice. It's an instructional manual that fills the explanatory gaps that plague contemporary social movements for black life, which simultaneously granting blackness the capacity to navigate through contradictory spaces. This material resonance is the radicalism of the antagonism that stuck with at all 17. I work with an anti-prison industrial complex, which has our 10 kind of choose black language to make sense of black people in relationship to persons, in relationship to persons, policing surveillance. There was also hostility, which is exactly what I'm thinking more. That I got involved now from being inspired by scholars and Harvard actually collected some of the things that I've been experiencing. I stayed involved and kept my fingers on local movements organizing called UDL by introducing us to the and sex and helping us to give a link towards the relationship between black people and white is black people and white institutions black people started. So radicalism, the institution itself remains as the anti-black organizing itself that is fundamentally not logically anti-black acrobatics on campus after the last meeting. To much you are not my ally people organized because in that moment decided to do an example of the influence in Afro-Western gave alien ways of coming across future to be recognized in certain words, creates organizations of Afro-Western black gave meaning as society wants to pay society wants to fight you on the head, you stay within the framework.
Absolutely. So read something?
Only our analysis of the liberal economy can explain why even the most utopian political solutions reproduce anti-black metaphysics through the medium of desire Araneg, because there's a perverse investment in and bias towards concrete materialist analysis which cannot escape anti-black modes of evaluation. They can win the case, but it'll never ensure black nature. The smallest known Douglas 18 huge, better picture to the white people's fantasy because tomorrow they'll be like the liberal economy of anti-Western forms the order of terms political economy. They say hugely towards materialist analysis of the world. The liberal economy has push we have to stay free or empathy at a point that we think our desire would black people still be free and they might not be free in our closely conscious or never imaginary theories of liberal economy trying to push us to even our most utopian political sensibilities each other by anti-what's not just a material truth of the world, but subconscious side. When we come to the existence of the present world, might be conscious schemas of what the world should look like on the other end, or deeply those forms like themselves and not to be influenced. So we have everything to use up in our imagination of what was an alternative becomes another form of terror and violence. But black people, these things might make some people say, but it actually doesn't make black people say the captivity in other forms. The notion of agency rights coherent for the factory being of blacks, which only can segment the ontological crisis on writing the modern era. For them to win the black agency is not an oxymoron. They must first for the absence of tangles the paradigmatic hold of slavery. Until then, their politics is nothing but a perverse fantasy as warren. As to demonstrate history, but it can only be public for the public who can express agency. Why do we assume black separation of the ontological blackness is not resolved? How do we see the law of resolve? And ontological crisis, humanism does not apply to black. The divinity losing political agency becomes agnostic when black. The blackness is not as in the effect of political agency within an anti-black context, and immediate reaction is that the ontological crisis is well. What is the evidence for social unity? One must bring the ontological discontinuity of slavery before we can talk about relations, constructive movements, and changes to not translated around future resolution change in the movement. Our metaphysical fantasies, agency under anti-black violence, source and system as a cause of coherence, services, and agencies in the school. Self-fulfilling non-coherence objects apply the grammar of coherence, the agency director being plus slavery for T, every attempt to dimension around anti-black with the agency reproduces anti-blackness. Eric.
You want the report copies?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Are you good?
Oh, yes.
Oh, no, not yet.
Oh, yeah.
We'd like this first. Yeah.
There's no. Yeah, let me know when you have.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Do you get?
Yeah.
Yeah. If not propose a political solution, what should the app do?
Sure. So, wait, what do you mean, what should the AF do?
What should the AF do if not propose a political solution?
So we think that the AF proposes a solution that cannot be exported outside the debate because we cannot influence those factors.
So what do we
think
do?
rather the AF should promote a, I'm not going to tell you what 1AC you should read,
Yeah,
but rather
okay,
a
what?
model of debate in which there's embodied approaches to the resolution.
Embodied approaches?
That's an example of
You
it.
just have to
yeah.
just relate to the topic.
I mean, we
Well,
read
it's
an
not- it's not
alternative. We
that you
haven't like
read-
yeah, like we've read a critique. We're
What
not
does that
saying
mean?
that you-
What else does the AF do? Your evidence says that the proposal of political solutions is bad.
So
Yeah.
sure, our evidence says a couple of different things. The first Wilderson evidence says that the app kind of plays into a tripartite arc of redemption, i.e. the move from equilibrium to disequilibrium back to equilibrium.
I
Kind
know
of
what the
presents-
link to the AF is, but what's the alternative?
Sure, the alternative is radical, is a form of active passivity, and kind of the way in which Barber and Sexton describe active passivity as a form of refusal to participate that kind of paves the way for moments of social life within social that can create, musical like
And
The
this
point is
solves-
not that you can know what happens after you refuse to participate. The
Why
line in
does,
the
why
card,
does the absence of political solutions solve anti-black violence?
it's not that it resolves anti-black violence,
But
but
it's a
paves the way
endurance.
that those politics could happen in the future.
What does that mean?
So,
Okay, so you do.
Okay, we're saying that what we're saying, me and Heather are non-black, and we occupy the non-black positionality. We do not have a jurisdiction to determine what black debate or black
I know,
should
but
look like.
you
Rather,
said,
we've said that.
you said that the alternative produces social life within social death,
Yes.
which paves the way for future politics.
Yes.
Are those political solutions good?
Those are not political solutions. The point is those are that.
So what is politics?
So
As
that's social life outside of civil society. Obviously, we're not nihilists, and we don't just throw our hands up and
So
say
what are you paving the path
I mean,
for?
okay, sure. If you look at the last piece of Douglas evidence we read, it talks about how it gives different examples of what kind of like an active pessimistic theory has helped translate into political solutions or political.
Which are?
Yeah, sure. Patrice Douglas talks about how kind of her understanding of Jared Sexton and Wildersonian Afro-pessimism has helped her challenge prison industrial complex. But at large, it also gives an example about Nick
I have a
Brady.
question.
Yeah.
Is any political action bad?
The negative has taken a stance that the 1AC is active political action.
Can any political action, any action taken by the government be good?
We think that they are good in the short term, but over a long period of
That
time.
was not the
they're
question. Are they good or bad?
They're bad.
Every action by the government is
Yes.
bad.
Okay,
You have to win that, right?
We will win that your framing of contingent modes of examples are when black Congress have happened are bad. Yeah.
So would the alternatives new paved road for politics result in reducing the public charge restriction?
No.
Never.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, I'm just thinking of it. It's the advantage framing the framework at the top of the critique. Can I have a stand? Or I'll stand over here. Okay, it should be set. Oh, thanks, Evan. Well, I'm actually not that tall. Yes, I got it. Yes, you're good. Thanks.
And then you have to. Oh, shoot. Can you hold it?
Okay, so I think we got it. It's a little tilted, but it's okay. Everyone good?
Yeah.
Public charge is the dominant tool used for the exclusion of disabled immigrants. Ableism in immigration itself is an impact not just because thousands are denied entry, but because the law itself perpetuates a hierarchy of ability by coding into law who is and isn't able. That's the Bayesian evidence. This is eugenics, the process of social engineering to produce a purified population and eradication of DVH, which culminates in systemic genocide. And as per the 1 and C, the alternative doesn't solve it, which means you have an independent reason to vote affirmative. The framing page, the state is them, they've conceded, and nothing we can do will disrupt the existence of the federal government, and turning away from the state to seize power to the alt-right and Donald Trump. It is no longer a question of if we should engage the government, but how. That's a shown evidence. Political liberalism in disability studies is uniquely good. It's an iterative process that results in incremental gains for individuals that currently face discrimination. That's been done of evidence, which also goes conceded independently. They've conceded that the discussion of the app alone is sufficient for you to vote affirmative. These salient issues literally mean life or death for thousands of migrants in the status quo. It humanizes individuals as far as macro political movement. That's the Rennick's evidence. Rule experimentation. It's good. There's no answer to 1AC Connolly that indicates hypothetical analysis of what the government should do is key to orient our subject formation around micro-political disruption. The fatalism of the alternative necessarily closes off interim gains and losses in the status quo means the alt fails and the permutations also as they came. Framework at the top that came must prove that the whole plan is bad. That's key to fair and predictable engagement. Permutation do both. The affirmative and the alternative are parallel tracks to reach the same endpoint. They're complementary. The alternative fails. It gets co-opted by the state and doesn't spill up. We can't change the state of debate, and debate doesn't change our subjectivities. No one thinks that A-spec or spark is true just because someone won it in a round. And look, the threshold for them winning this debate is they have to prove every single instance of government action is false. If we prove that one contingent example of government reform is possible, then you should vote affirmative. Sweeping psychological generalizations of politics have no explanatory power in the table of 93. There's something offensive about rejecting interpretation of complex social political problems because of psychological terms and complex social political phenomena to unfortunately individual freedom that is important for reading the entire cultural subject of looking for pathological social and pathology. It's not to be excited about. Psycho is bad, even if it's true. Pathologizes suppression and shifts the blame to individuals instead of bad structures, which internally turns the critique. The theory itself is wrong because it's not falsifiable. People have conflicting drives in their social lives to see the world in a certain way. That's phrased from the 1AC. Their view of political death cements anti-black suffering. It flattens out social differences and obscures contingent analyses of state reform. That's Klein and 17. The absent prioritization of ontological frameworks such as macropolitical and the analysis of macropolitical theory, which black is almost overly sedimented and improving the movement and test bracket. The theory politics sedimentally background, the prioritization of ontological structure, which law regulates life to be the position of the distortion and analysis of everything like practice and apparatus of technology, to change the example of the relations with the power of the national independent philosophy to political society, and the black equals ontological presumption which forgive the flow of social service and condition and expect prioritizing the victimizing the filter steps. Blacks on the terms to do northern from the black and lesbian social reductions of black society, see all considering binary final social legislation and such as virtually to eliminate the evolution of political resistance or sound political resistance and the whole language of radically apological political management and right to resist the power of versus they do not have the absolute destruction of the law should be continued to resist the anti-blackness and absolute freedom can only work from the national living rights and that's actually as members of the practice or socially developed by national right from the under the approach. There's nothing else in the political future so it's no whatever this role is not a permutation. Do both get a benefit of the affirmative they're totalizing. Sure. And double by either the alternative doesn't do anything which locks in status quo or creates a praxis by which to make decisions which by definition is not a radical negativity and spiritual hope atomizes versus suppression and seeds the political to authoritarian forces. The pragmatic hope can confront violence and avoids the energy power of individuals and communities. Cycling 18 hopes to run individuals to the field to become the full process of hoping and the impact of the ideology of the in the face of the pragmatic account the pragmatism lost my hands to understanding hope and like other has a notion of the lives of the social theological accounts of pragmatism that just these obstacles capable of punishment and the same things about the democracy are related to some word of their taken as a farm because they have such a noble job for them to have a purpose of the war and on citizens of the public that also that home these they don't see the conditions of being passive and is into the political practice and is a function of they lose the ability to take social policy and vision to really them the deliberate ability that increases the democracy and pragmatism complex the expectation of fables of energy as to formulate and try out solutions and the will to the sacrament to be growing and creating to the establishment of the living medium probably so the growth has an end the growth is a really significant of the sector and from the growing is educational worthwhile the assessments of relative difference from the theological captain to the sustainability plans frustrated and paradigm of action practices is also what is going to do the rise in the back the alarms of the banana programs psychology of national and certain uncertainty the alerts of the electric focus and not often and then cultivates hope for the better world and extend the Jones evidence on the framing page absent macro political action and that is able to mobilize people who have their hands on the lever power you should see alt solvency is zero the alt gets co-opted or is compatible with the affirmative and the F is radical negativity it negates the existence of the government and the no link the Wilderson read the Wilderson negative state action card after the right it actually says nothing it doesn't even mention negative state action was it's such a non-starter there wasn't even anything to re-highlight and link turn the F represents an abdication of power by the federal government we eliminate one facet of power that the government currently possesses in resignation to set to their ontology framework of the framework of political ontology is essentializing promotes an unnecessary federalism towards politics Act 16 Resignation of the only program responsibility for homes is worth on the institutional leases the kind of adjustment addressing the kind of provisions and company of some models and the certain of the condition one weeks ago by the rest of the responsibility and literally for the situation that just provision essentially social construction and reason to be used in constitution converse is dynamic and political strategy and the model change the climate and we have a formula by the formula and the living out of the what is the I see a chance, but after me, pretty sure the women, question about my entrance and the way to address the other, little to be relatively the children were also the ordinary taking on the much of our churches and kitchen below. I can't imagine the return of the background of churches that extends to all of us, even get to change all students. Today, I made some knowledge and the professional systems and casual factors of the local things and interest on the flows, and their sort of mental process of government country for now, and review of motion contingency is false and belief in social death worsens the problems. Gordon 17 showing out to a wife and life on the world, more close than it is, and the he was really any of these in the conversation about so for the encouraging many people so that they can have the election of session because I made the fight. I guess it's somebody has that being on the reason of the social norms and power and social science and phrases. Was only by action, not just the race, but the world of the races becomes irrelevant and objection governments and the research of the kind of the pyramid of social world. Purpose of the entities and perspective that take reason of the lives of each other can be discovered in it. Here's a function power, study power, their social manifestations of intellectual. He's looking down to understand weapons and then they're ready to take words more than a chance about the sense one. Nobody back in the world, there's a massive material determined users in the hands and the optimism pessimism are the same after operating such as reality. Human existence contingent on our extent of the world. Is a manifestation of human action because even can only be a future time of the task. There was a man to him doing the pessimistic after forecast and there's nobody who knows the virus to be able to watch the position of the point. It's not about such a moment where human did the work doing and hope and belief in agency is life sustaining prevents battle fatigue change in 18. Hope especially hope agency because the creature of the cause of advancing the technology and just in the rare for the variance and adjustment associated with the racial discrimination social support for fighting compelling out of struggle importance of agents in the mental health and well-being of African American adults and the alt is dangerous fatalism that naturalizes political deaths and prevents successful movements to challenge oppression. Gordon in 12-7 in anti-liberals and the world of the anti-liberals a project on that she made it to block of upon pitching the BBC the BLM and such records even the front of the store with the basic members selected the member contractors back when the world is served them themselves and others and persons on the other side of watchers and their nihilism people don't learn themselves and their actions sexually and priority events that actually impose their vote in the futures yet to come then because of course we gender struggles today and there the suffers from the church and family life and contact for the union by ongoing effects to build relations known to actually into situation unless your camera cannot be done before action that the physical collapse of the faith and then if it are instituted for committing actions simply made so there's a failing and paradox of the views and social failing and failure of the causes is a sort of phenomenon with the social welfare statement it's not political resignation seeking a form of clarity collapses into morals instead of public responsibility by action and that's a political solution of the power is a human movement with zero satisfaction relations beyond the body and ever present then immediately the market will reference is the immediate paradigm paradox so a satisfaction as with the paradox is that times the best option is to move on and group mentalities can't be metaphysically fixed nor can they explain individual psyches so plan isn't tied down to their flawed theory of semiotics. Bertrand 16. The classic test of the crowd, he says the crowd is a reason we perform sees human establishes just like races and the sex of it happens and the fact that they don't have the reasons about these active objects in their lives can just point at anybody who lives in your found those of hundreds of you are carrying people who know psychological evidence here and individually have to be done such change then you get a sense of evidence of we are infinitely malleable changes so no processes but not group psychology sentences called the variable self. Anything else? Yeah, that's good.
Alright, you good?
Yeah.
Okay, so you read the overview on incremental reform. What does it mean to humanize an individual?
Instead of kind of viewing them in the status quo, which we think that U.S. immigration policy views individuals simply as tools to include or exclude based on their potential.
What is your definition of a human?
What do you mean?
What does it mean
Well,
to
we
be
think in
human?
the context of the affirmative, we think humans are people who are coming to the United States and are denied at the border.
So, people that are coming to the border, those are the
You don't
only
describe
humans?
some universal definition.
Yeah, we don't think there's a universal definition of human, but we think that an example of a human are people who are coming to the United States and are denied at the border, and we should let them in.
Okay, and that is an act of humanizing an individual? You're the one who has said that it humanizes individuals. I'm asking, what does it mean to humanize an individual?
Oh, I see what you mean. Our argument here is that currently we view them simply as tools, and they're either useful tools, which we would include, or they're not useful tools, which we would exclude. We think that that framework is bad because it views individuals solely on a productivity scale,
Okay.
which I've indicted throughout the 1AC as forms of ableism.
So it's fine. You say any one contingent example of the government being good warrants an act ballot. Does this one contingent example need to be the affirmative?
Well, we think that if we would, another contingent example is good, that means that you don't
When I say
have
process
to
was,
be
the
affirmative.
only thing you're defending is the affirmative. Now you're saying any contingent
No,
example.
we think that any contingent example of kind of the government being good is a reason why the affirmative would be good because all of your links are in the context of no contingent examples of the government being good, which means that if we win over, if we win that there have been contingent examples of the government being good, obviously the affirmative could be one of those, and you don't have links that are specific to the app.
Okay, I see the threshold. The client evidence says that kind of pessimistic analysis leads to forms of radical violence. What kind of radical violence?
Yeah, the client evidence indicates a couple of things. First, it indicates that we kind of lock in oppression because we're unable to forward notions at the macro political level, i.e. we don't engage the government because we assume that the government will strike us down, which results in more policies being passed that are bad for oppressed minorities, i.e. if we don't engage the government, they're able to pass more anti-black policies, anti-immigration policies. The second level is that we create this sort of ressentiment at the self level, which means that people are even less likely to engage in micro-political resistances because they feel that even if they're able to engage in a successful micro-political resistance, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, the government controls.
How's the act an example of radical negativity?
We negate the existence of the U.S. federal government, which is pretty radical.
How do you do that?
We take away their power to enforce immigration law. In fact, we take away the immigration law entirely.
Okay, sure. The kind of last question I have, the Viper evidence, the last one we read, says that they're infinitely malleable, and
so group psychology is kind of this infinitely malleable thing. Just because we're in a group doesn't mean we identify as part of that group. Because the example of people in a crowded subway in London, just because you're there doesn't mean you identify as the crowded subway in London. That is obviously crazy, which we would deny.
It's tech, right?
Yeah.
6-5.
Sorry, how much did you have?
6-5. 6-5.
Okay.
There's one. Actually, probably. But so we're good. It'll be no cards, straight down.
Is there an overview?
It starts on
Frame.
It starts on framework.
Oh, okay.
Like
Okay.
It's like good. Cool. We're good. The asked framework of rejoinder of the consequence of a hypothetical plan and act because uses cyber intellectual incentive subjectivity that rests its heart will be very clear. This debate will not be about if the U.S. such issue reduce restriction on legal immigration. They're trying to limit the debate to those parameters reveals they have no stake in providing a theory that can speak to the binds of structure of the world out current traditions and what it sees an object study which can contest their research to attack the scholarly basis, not just plain text. And in fact, our interpretation predicts why every piece of what is the evidence is used to elicit a response from the judge. The negative should be able to indent the justification for the plan itself. We've indicted the entirety of their view of debate. The way we debate is actively complicit in a project of anti-back worlding that perpetuates the apological slavery. Debate is a training ground that produces advantage for our workers in civil society. It teaches us all forms of violence. We wish away a fancy of administering tinkering where the vow could be an ameliorative mechanism of prior wholeness can be restored. That's why even though we all supposedly know fiat isn't real, it doesn't effectuate material change. We dogmatically adhere to these protocols anyway. They concede the first piece of Wilder's evidence. It's not a link, but a framework argument. It starts at equilibrium. Consent debate narrates a tale of ethicality on adhering to a tripartite redemptive arc. This rhetorical structure begins with equilibrium. The assumed existence of the world within social relation are mediated by all subjects. Then warns there's an irrational desire within debate to perpetuate this false system, solving it and disgenuinely label as activism, i.e. the plan. Nobody here believes that Peninsula will resolve a single problem. They posture as empathetic activists, saying we will humanize people only when debating people who are less wed to the same sham game that they are. The entire enterprise of policy oriented debate is motivated by bad faith and worse, the libido side appears good, non-black persons whose innocence can be restored through imaginary problem solving. This is a hidden relay between individual debaters' subjectivities and the broad institutional apparatus of governance and social exists. The ability to restore equilibrium to the latter, i.e. the plan grants of security in the former. It's a mechanism of disavowal and guilt. Situation forces blacks to undergo structural adjustment, which has an external impact on max activity. To both act, we must earnestly tell us that continuing to read the same over and over, somehow the balance are going to accumulate to material change and reduction. And by it's a fairness standard, nothing about weighing the apps to the standard clashes the only internal link. We can weigh the apps intellectual strategy, but we get to garner links on the discourse and methodology. There's also weaponization to add their instance of non-clinging to fairness to protect their normative model of debate, disavows black scholarship and upholds racist justification like the N-word in favor of the plan being, quote, a good idea. This means that unfairness in this case is good. It creates cognitive dissonance, sorts of the teachable moment, and deny the ability to uphold such a system. Their predictability standard, no impact to predictability. You have chosen to read the app through a research practice. You should be able to defend them too. Is the morals of dissent. Predictability is the white tactic used to state system. Life is not predictable. For Michael Brown or Antel Sterling, moments before their lives ended, instances that debate should operate on a predictable playing field, moving to innocence that weaponizes predictability to shelter the system. Our nature doesn't preclude clash anyways, which would be the only terminal impact. You can still use the truth claims of the one CI reforms, good possible extinction always stay good, blacks not ontological off-field solves their rooting offense. The Woods cards impact turns the entire framework. It says that immigration focuses anti-black and should be rejected. I'll do that on the link debate proper. Permutation to both. Save some space on your flow. That'll be the one in R, but I'll do the link debate here. Every link I do serves as a scholarship dissent to the app. Even if they win every truth claim in the JC, the plan recreates maximum capacity, which is a reason to reject the team link framing. Be concerned with what the affirmative said, not what they meant. There are infinite number of ways to communicate meaning, but the unconscious reveals through the ways we decide to enunciate our statements. Versus immigration focused and spiritual entry, keeping slave trafficking cavity of a continuous structural adjustment. The question no longer remains how does one work in excess of the United Slave States, or how can we make it more hospitable to immigrants? Immigration is conservative framing that shifts up focus. A political project that allows non-black citizens to gain a sense of coherence on the plantation by being able to form a new kinship with other non-white citizens while distancing themselves from blackness. It causes any anti-American belief by pausing the branches in Washington as the equitable arbitrator of right to sustain the empirical project of blackness. The very notion creates a good immigrant which operates on a different circuit, the circuit of mobility and blackness. This is proven by when black immigrants such as Tyler Holmes refer to black Americans as having a ghetto American accent, upholding the libidinal attachments to perfect the citizen. Second is the savior complex. They conceded words are not neutral. Therefore, the U.S. anti-action creates a savior complex, which again is an natural word about voting and burden, describing government policies around reinterest walls of the state that always built in opposition to blackness. It creates neural communication, that political hope, that deep and psychological bias makes black debaters more naive to hidden tactics used by the state to convince them that it's impossible. It creates an external impact active response model, which literally results in generalized anxiety, heart attack, trades off with agency, which kills any movement offense. The third is BI's anti-black ones, porn shopping, their imagination, spectacular forms of suffering, the form of extinction, trades off with focus on quotating back block human face, which outweighs. We imagine the speech actor, the one he saves them or humanizes someone and feel good about ourselves. It has a desire for suffering for the sake of the battle, which is violent and recreates their impacts. It lets us distance ourselves from the performance in space. We think that pragmatic change is solving for harm. These changes at the level of political economy are absent the alternative intervention of the libidinal fiat trades off with their black rhetoric when asked to prove mutual exclusivity with their permutation. Third is a cruel hope. Just that we have a false investment in their education skills, which furthers anti-black practice debate. Turns our framework. It means that the alt reinterpretation key, they need to justify the use of fiat before they get to weigh the contents of the They say the alt doesn't solve. Obviously, voting negative isn't just like poof, anti-blackness goes away. But if we prove that their research practices are anti-black, then you should vote negative. It reintroduces a model debate that is humanist. They don't also answer the solemnity mechanism alternative. We'll extend it here. You should refuse to participate instead of embrace blackness as active passivity. They continue to conserve blackness interaction with the political terrain. The demand of refusal lights out all parameters of realizability, makes it possible to pin blackness down to approximate belief that voting negative dwells with the incoherence as refusal of the acts of immigration policy, which rejuvenates the black world. You vote not after throw their hands out the wheel. You might never know what trajectory the alternative generates, but you know it refuses the anti-blackness here in the way it frustrates desires to restore equilibrium. Critique lights apply to decenters the county's focus on future articulation in favor of community's character. Now we can't change the state, but we can change the state based their libidinality offense. A sub point, their conflicting drives argument is an offense. Libidinal economy isn't a monolith, it's a striking infrastructure oscillates between philanthropic objects. How you Trump can call black women, all black workers lazy while bragging about how black people show up to his rally. Cognition has necessity. The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Libidinality isn't proof experimentally. There's no coherent cause of action, but they're repeating compulsions that prove its existence in moments of gratuity. That means that only gauge for evidence is repeating schemas. In this debate, Officer Sherry Hall in Georgia, who couldn't shoot shot by 6'4" black men who never existed, then questioned about it, said she didn't know what she thought. That Philly operates on a safety valve for non-black people's desires. The election of Obama to the White House and no offer was a distraction tactic used to nullify claims of anti-black violence. Obviously, people's rights are static. That was above. It's a pacifying technique to obscure more insidious forms of violence. Look no further than black codes, Jim Crow, the war against the election of Trump. The was shot 41 times in less than a minute. The libidinal economy is the only structure that can explain why one black person shot 41 times rather than 41 black people once. This answers their conflicting drives. Offense, it also doesn't pathologize individuals because it's about a system at large in which those individuals are in the first place. The kind evidence, the three answers, I'll answer all three warrants, I'll answer all of them. Essentially essentializes black people. Still society does essentialize all black people. African female middle passage applies regardless of their difference. Essentialization is also good for non-black kind tells avoids fraction from same answer institutions too. It says macro-political analysis ontology precludes specific analysis, but if a Klein member gives examples of what analysis precludes, so you should be skeptical. 3 says we preclude forms of pragmatic resistance, but we are pragmatic. That's the alter. False choice label. Only movements that engage in state pragmatic form respectability. Politics that you should reject on face. The double bind of does something. It's a question of prerequisites and how those politicals are warranted in the future. The example that shares given in cross-text is procedure thuggers who use Afro-pessimists as a flame for future of politics. It's not a question of engaging the state, but rather spilling into communities of care outside the state that you're now the way to debate. They say the pragmatic hoax stuff that will be answered, and the one in our with the solvent piece of evidence. It explicitly name drops Warren and says nihilistic responsibility without hope is bad. We're not nihilists, we're pessimism. The Jones evidence about mobilizing people. Again, the same answer above applies. It's not a question of engaging the state outside of it, but rather creating forms of analytics that can understand how anti-blackness operates here in the status quo. The alt is radical negativity, the bullshit that will be answered in the one and only. The Wilderson card was not a link, but a framework argument. I'll go to the ontology debate proper. Top low frame for all their ontology arguments is the relativism and dissatisfied non-black members of civil society. We have a predisposition to refuse thinking of life as ontological because our subject positions are rooted in realm of contingent, subjective and political engagement. Even if we lose the truth claims we have our ontology arguments, blackness should be thought of as otherwise black positioning within our work is excluded in favor of our own subjective placement. That for closest radical thinking because of our engagement in discussion at level of politics. Any reasons they're winning their ontology arguments is due to your anti-black minds that you should overcorrect. For blackness is ontological, make them disprove all three pillars to win the argument. First, choose minds, no rational explanation, type to no church control law. Second, the alienation. The middle passage forever promote Africans and black slaves and all such a heritage, identity, creating sense of vertigo and annihilation of black age. Third, general dishonor, no matter where they're in the world, the black states state for all oppression because a negative standard. Winning an example doesn't prove the theory. All theories have outliers. It's a question of repetition of anti-black, black side successful. They haven't defended any theory. That's what see cross they have to disprove our examples, which is done. Above the no economy debate, the Gordon card group, both of them, I'll answer every one. First is, even if we lose the ontology argument, Gordon's argument is that an anti-black world is not the anti-black world. It means he can be right. If you win a link argument, it means that they are not a world that is divorced from anti-blackness. 2 is black people might be able to resist or conceive themselves as individuals in a nominal sense, but it's only a question of sentient relationality, which is where Gordon fucks up. Gordon confuses relationality at the level of the human, which requires one to possess A, time, space, transformation capacity, the recognition of capacity via civil society, and B, subject to contingent rather than gratuitous violence. It's only a question of structure adjustment to pure white. 2 seconds. We'll take perhaps starting at 6.
Yeah. Just yeah, I got it. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
I got this. Yeah. Huh? There's a concept computer, but give me that. If you want to make this up there, yeah, it's about 10 now. I'm good.
Framework
Yes.
said that we should view it we should view the 1AC as an object of research or something.
Object of study.
Yeah, object of study. What part of the 1AC's research itself do you critique?
So there's 3 links to just the research practices. We think that immigration focus on immigration reform is
Why should we
anti-black.
not focus on immigration given
So-
the resolution?
So we think that the resolution or voting or the affirmative posits an arc of redemption. That was the whole top level on
Wait,
framework.
should ASK talk about the topic?
No.
No?
No, we
What
don't
should we
think
talk
that
about?
even if you do talk about immigration reform, it should not be in the
So what's
context of
evidence
US
that the
reduced
way in which
restrictions.
black system criminality operates kind of
Wait,
under.
no. I have more questions about that then. If we should not focus on immigration or focus on the object of the resolution, what should we focus on?
No, so the distinction is that you should focus on the United States federal government reducing restrictions on these.
Well,
on
that's what the
immigration.
resolution calls for. So what should we focus on?
So we should rather focus on strategies that can, again, I'm not gonna tell you what the 1AC is, but rather, that's why,
I'm not
okay, the
asking you to
alternative,
tell me what
the alternative is
1AC
kind of
I'm
interesting.
asking you to tell me what ground the affirmative has.
So any strategy that combats anti-black violence, we think is,
Why is that a predictable model of debate for the affirmative?
we think it's predictable because you can still clash with the app, i.e., the only reason it wouldn't be predictable
Well,
is
we
if the
can't
negative
read an
couldn't
app
clash.
unless we know what your ground, it's concessionary ground from the negative to the affirmative, which doesn't make any sense. That's okay. The links Proctor has proposed.
Yeah.
You've made this kind of fiat is bad. Where has the affirmative indicated that we believe that like all of these changes
It's not that you
happen?
believe that affirmative has happened, but rather your insistence on imagining that the USFG do something and then equating that to humanizing
Sure.
immigrants
I
is
suppose-
anti-black.
How,
Because it
how
pursues-
does the alternative not link to this offense?
Because
It
the
says
alter-
that we should negate the affirmative.
No, that's what I was
anti-black.
going to explain above. It's like the alternative is interesting in this debate because it's not a question of what we should do, but how we should do it. Obviously, the alternative has not said this is a mode of black politics that we should endorse.
I guess-
Obviously, neither Sherry's right or black.
If you're
Rather,
right
we should
about that.
clear the space for true activity, which is a quote
Sure.
from the second
I guess
part.
if you're right that it's not a critique of what we should do, but rather how we should do it,
Yeah.
then why is the affirmative not compatible with the alternative?
Because the affirmative has posited a research practice that is anti-black. Top-down implementation, we have critiqued, reinforces the system because it says that,
So
look, we have
basically
done
it's a
one good
state
policy.
link.
And there's 3 links that I'm just explaining the link that would answer that argument. You've said in, I think it was last cross-text, that reducing one restriction nullifies the state's power. We think that logic is anti-black
that it
because it says
nullifies
that
the state's power in
reducing
one
one
instance.
restriction is like, look, everything's
I
getting
think
better.
this-
You shouldn't have your radical black
I-
protests
I'd
because
love
things
to
will get
have
better in the future. Yeah.
I think that's fine, honestly. It's not productive. Okay.
It's just, there was one card and I just sent it out of the doc. Or the body, sorry. But I'm going to kind of finish up on like the hope stuff, the line by line, and then permutation, and then like the framing contention.
I'm sorry, I totally missed
Yeah,
all
yeah.
that. What was that?
I'm gonna finish up on like the line by line with like the hope debate, the Chang evidence, and like the last piece of evidence, and then it'll be the permutation debate, and then like the framing contention, like the role experimentation,
Okay.
radical cards, and stuff. Can I time? Very good. The
chain evidence is really bad. There's no examples or specificities that cited in the evidence. Also doesn't make any form of distinction between political hope and spiritual hope, which our evidence does. They're focused on political hope and ensure psychosomatic violence. That Sullivan and some black Americans use actions many other people who think black race of pragmatic practice, physical optimism. The other can be physically harmful. One thing their bodies not due to psychosomatic violence, such that they are less able to withstand inequities and migration, racial microaggression, contributed to scholar racial violence, with judgment, psychological research for our. The RDF has been linked to depression, tension, generalized anxiety, disorder, physiological well-being that harms black health, contributing to hypertension, cardiovascular disease, birth rates, and infant mortality. They were not the bodies. Various environmental structures that accumulate over time, racism, kills, and also. The group mentalities part also doesn't make any sense because you should frame this to our examples. Any so even examples prove that this is a gratuitous nature of violence. Also, proves that the liberal economy is a monolith, which had obviously answered the 2AC. It's not a question of the liberal economy being a monolith, but that it oscillates between cycles of phobia and feeling, which was the liberal economy overview. Go to the permutation debate. Framing issue. Our arguments about the narrative are means that they can't get a permutation. Permutations themselves are reductive, rhetorical exercises that move from equilibrium, the original speech I disequilibrium, the invocation of our link arguments, and equilibrium restored. A radical synthesis that salvages the 1AC from destruction means we don't only have the links to their mechanisms, but also they form of the permutation as an active investment in the redress that relegates captivity to the unblocked. We should group the permutations. They're all either do what they're separate. The affirmative defense, the backwards of civil society, whereas the alternative is anti-ethical to the consumption of affirmation. Any chance that they met this argument that means that the permutation severs the rest of civil society or is intrinsic to the 1AC justification, which is a severance person voted for knife the revolutionary potential impact turns to the negative permutation. We impact turn humanism, which the affirmative lies on to coherence of the alt. Disinvest faith in redeeming civil society while you have faith in it. You should vote negative on the permutation. Should means immediate. It's a question of sequencing. Demanding for radical negativity is the precondition for absolutism because only the alternative treats the political. Their centering design. Any political strategy does not center blackness is doomed to increase the alliance with an anti-black civil society and increasing state power acceptance and rejection as radically opposed. There's no in the middle. The permutation mystifies the paradigm of anti-blacks. There is no way of incorporating blackness into a civil society or state founded on its constitutive negation. And if it does that, it's just parasitic on black suffering. Co-option is that the permutation becomes a contingent focus on violence, equates a reductive narrative of the state which trades off with the alternative. This means that any link is both through the act and the permutation because it either creates a trick of time that prolongs the metaphysical violence or creates a narrative of this time it'll be better, which trades off with strategies of analysis and forces black people to invest in their co-optimism. You can't change the state of debate. The argument about how we can't change the state of debate doesn't make any sense because obviously increasing black argumentation and not let people understand their complicity in globalized anti-blackness proves the argument. Go to the framing contention. We have impact turned the narrative of state inevitability. The 1MC board evidence says the ongoing reactionary campaigns that challenge state authority and try to reform within it to rely on a form of white victimization that's antagonistic to black is the question. The question should of how we engage the government, but the question should not be of how we engage the government. Material research factors that we can do here that translates to material change. The Douglas evidence proves that we're not some theoretical BS, but Afro-pessimism as Afro-pessimism and theoretical lens can't create material change, i.e. Patricia Douglas organizing and challenging the international complex or Nick Brady, challenging the multicultural office at JHU, all prove that Afro-pessimism as a theoretical love framework can create material change. The incremental reform to be with impact turn by the time accumulates not fast to be that head. Into the 2NC, also the writing evidence is the epitome of anti-blackness, i.e. the need to humanize people or immigrants and incorporate them into civil society by removing the public charge, which their conception of security always said the human as the positive standard as to which everyone should aspire to be, which is always antagonistic to blackness and is parasitic on black suffrage, which plays into our narrative of equilibrium that was also explained about, and also answers any of their asks a good idea, or they don't get the, or the no wildership link arguments, because this is the whole notion of what Wilderson talks about expanding the elasticity of civil society to ensure that the human is the center of civil society. Also, the savior complex in the 2NC impact shows that you form a role experimentation. All of this proves that there's nothing about the app that is radical negativity, but rather it reinvests with the humanist redemption that structures the way debate operates. I'm going to do the reform debate here, which should be a framing issue for most of the case offense. Even if they win that the reforms are possible, is there to improve the plan? How can the plan materially improve black lives? Just because the system can get better isn't a reason to justify anti-black scholarship. This means that they can be right about incremental reform, but at any risk of linking that you have a categorical comparative to vote negative because they're not in the rejected direction of the state. You should reject any progress narrative on face. Peninsula use of particular black protests against those that fail to work within governability is a form of respectable politics, but there are a couple of steps before the way you evaluate responses. First, time accumulates, that passes which flips the burden, make them prove that net progress has happened. The argument is that reform is counterbalanced with new violence. It's a question of form, not value, which is what formally calls the perfection of slavery. This means that 1AR must answer the question, why does anti-black violence still exist on the same register if reforms have happened?
649.
Bless you.
Are you ready for an order? The order is the advantage and the K. Okay, everyone good? Okay.
But after the eugenic implication of public charge will grant millions of immigrants life-saving social services, this is offense against the off. They will be always turned away from practical solutions and immigration issues which recreates hyper-nationalism and entrenched white supremacy, which makes it impossible to solve anti-black status quo of the state. It's inevitable. There's no way the alternate solve it without using the same notions of political hope that the Athens has chose. The notion that we can fight the state without using public roads, street lights, buildings, taxes, fighting ICE and the FBI officers is nonsense. Every single component demands resistance to the state, which demands engagement with it. The humanism link. First, no, like we never described the totalized definition of human. We just described an instance of dehumanization. Their impact since of forcing back people out of society through an exclusionary conception of human. Second, impact toward humanism is good. We should see people, their individual agency, change the governmental structure. This political hope, this is political hope, governments that would be explained in the K. Also, a third, there's no semiotic basis on it, which will be indicted the critique. I'll answer the rest of the psychological line, starting at the bottom of the one arm, the critique proper. The K framework. The K must prove the desirability of the plan. Also, you have impact on the all unfairness. The categorization does not solve us. We'll like to point out any trivial epistemic disagreement with one AC, and then disregard the other sentiment, which was the structure behind turn dedications, the terminal link to and competitive incentives to learn. Second, research debating with the intricacy of immigration is crucial to alleviate the conditions of millions of asylum voters. There's no blueprints, create traditions for unending structural biases. Branding so role the judge to determine who the better debating. And there's arbitrary and self-serving. The absolucy means that we win with the frame of the categorical paradigm. The categorical paradigm demands to question the consequences. If the USFG should reduce restriction, if the USFG should reduce restriction, then what should the topic be? There's no threshold or reasonable burden for us to just move right after and talk about anti-blackness, colonialism, capitalism, the human embargo. These are infinite arrests and still the benefit to talent and research of debate is a training ground. The best way to do this by cultivating portable skills, which only we can access by running a tangible point of research and allow us to cultivate blueprints and a future political solution in which their alternative would have to lead to. Whether free change the world is irrelevant, it's a good heuristic to evaluate the world upon because it allows us to formulate political activism. It is activism. Their dichotomous assumption that creating solutions and blueprint within the debate is completely separate from the outside world takes out all the air offense too, because that's the premise of the alternative, the N-word argument. This shouldn't be a debate argument. We shouldn't debate that out. We should just drop us. And second, there's no equivalence between this and their model debate. They can't solve this, and they just create random parameters for advocacy, not what's said within a round. Just because there are structural unpredictabilities and fairness is a reason to throw away procedural equity. In fact, in 9 weeks, their offense includes the disconnect between debate and political inroads to black protest clashes in the impact. Is question of whether it was pretty else above the permutation. Do both. We believe the public charge is bad. Political solutions are ineffective. The aphorism is a statement of the likelihood of the planet, but just that normatively we will produce better benefits in the cost. I think it all links to all our political hope good offense, or there's no link. They agree that there's a future inroads of politics and we can formulate changes out the public charge without trade-off. And their answer to the Gordon evidence proves that we can envision a world that's not the anti-black world that would be compatible with the alternative. Links by the question of the theory which will be indicted below. But first, the immigration focus. Link one, no trade-off. There's no such thing as a purely racial, purely immigration issue. It involves nativism and demographic change, which explain what's the white supremacy argument explain the case. Second, there's no link to benevolent election. We see the government is bad and the immigration system that views people in the basic ability is unredeemable. Third, it's good. Focusing on immigration allows us to figure out Other blueprints for reform that can be cross-applied to the personal industrial complex. The same thing accomplished lies in the lies in theory, but hope is good. Shenanigans indicates that a randomized control file says that black students who engage in goal-oriented behavior are not optimistic about the future display lower risk. That's a chain evidence much better than their soul evidence, which is a literature review. Distancing link clicks just as much of them because they don't change the mold as much as the civil society link. We're negative city action. We said that the U.S. immigration system is irredeemable. Shit does not mean immediate. There's no card. There's a portion which the firm is viable. The co-option argument was above on the immigration focus stuff. The ontology debate to win their links, they with an overwhelming risk that social stigmas will never change. And presuming that there's an essence society relies on an immutable subconscious drive, which is nonsense. Two threads: one, unfalsifiable. Their scholarship connects to Dutch retroactively than any explanatory power, cherry-picking historical examples that align with their vision of society. But you can't verify that society itself will forever adopt an anti-black ideology. You have to be a telepath to measure everyone's inner mind, given that society is controlled by millions of thoughts. That's sustainable. Second, a pathology of depression. The necessity that there's a hidden subconscious that explains everything, prevents inner gains, and naturalized system of justice. The claim that everything in society is based on biology, grounded psyche is quantum and neocons embrace that view. Oppression is now less great. Start framing issue. Don't let them flip the burden of proof. They need a metric by which you can plausibly draw counterexamples. Otherwise, you can assign their claims zero things. They'll just say that this is another example of anti-blackness, sort of a product of the liberal economy, which obviously is not valid. Trump is not racist because of the liberal economy, but because of socialization and the fact that he's a constituent of the Republican Party. Their examples don't prove any subconscious ontological condition. They just prove that racism is terrible now. The example is fun. The culture is not static. All their examples, like any condition to prenatal symbolic order, the causal state are resulted are the product of politics, not necessarily any sort of liminal drive. And second, hindsight is 20/20. Making irrational decisions can be entirely subconscious. The spiritual hope, good stuff. Racial biases are malleable. Prefer was empirical evidence. Matthew 15. Social identity of gross body full evidence that implicit bias and malice. Empirical evidence that well established and strong evidence. It was acting not possible to control evidence associated with external factors with evidence demonstrates implicit action of some no choice and implicit only continue make based on also sources of knowledge that achieve that value being destroyed ongoing or present old objection implicit value is strong to new about it because unconscious thinking and change unlike the mission that implicit is cheat on their stereotypes original should be the season thinking back to advice and algae original one of liberation against automatically the inevitability assume reflections and relevant strong collective records of how to take intervention me training dudes and plus writing reduce Martha Carter reduced the impact to all these arguments are the framework arguments above and trading off with political solutions is bad and subverts any strategy of resistance.
6:05.
I took preps as
Oh, right, like 5:20 something.
5:40.
Okay.
Can I see it for a second? Okay, sure.
Is there any chance I can use either of the outlets over there?
There's a chance what?
I can use either of the outlets over there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you can.
Cool.
The order's in case, right? Is anybody not ready? Uniqueness question, French about this debate about models debate. They've conceded theirs is anti-black. Not a question about the plan. They missed the boat. Debate enforced an apparatus of rejection that continues to reform ontological capacity, positive immigration policy, and target of redress, which teaches upon an anti-black narrative of disequilibrium, equilibrium restored. They've conceded the assumption that there's a prior plenitude, that the plan can fix, reinforce the anti-black model debate. They've said that it forces black to try to go structural adjustment, which has an external impact on maximum integrity while prioritizing rejection in the place of repetition. Your LME ethical response to refuse to participate. Two arguments to start to make your RT. One, you can see the salty mechanism of the alternative voting negative and habits a zone of incoherence or refusal to revitalize the social life of the social death. You vote not after for yourself from the wheel pragmatists in favor of communities care. Here in the wake debate, they can see the framing issue from the two. Remember, you can't change the state, but you can change the state debate. Voting negative pressures and start to restore that exact equilibrium with changing visceral reactions. It's a material practice that clears the ground for true activity for black debaters here and now. Second, their response to the solid evidence is just bad. Focus on state-based politics tears down body systems by creating high aesthetic load via structure to intensify psychological violence and literally results in general anxiety and heart attacks. Battle fatigue depletes psychological resources, which trades off in microflow strategies here and now. It creates a cruel hope, which results in response that outweighs any offense or winning to their model debate because it's secondary to the process of actually debating in the first place. The Chang evidence is a question of one study. Solving cites 9 of them and says that these have conceded that hope in the political results in resentment because it results in a frustrating desire to never solve anything, which I'll do on the ontology debate proper. Go to framework and send the counter debate about the L1AC as an object study. It's only a question of scholarship. They concede it's impossible to diverse the unspoken parts of the debate from the spoken ones. The capacity of judge to weigh the apple parts and access scenario analysis, which is a libido process of rubber banding between blackness and freedom. Before you can determine the act to be a good idea, you must first define the field of condition for which the world exists. Absent attempting to legacy, you become an agent of historical revision that contributes to liberal march of progress. Fairness, they conceded defense. You can win the app as an intellectual stance. I yell their evidence about performance without impact to the app group. We don't restart the debate in the 2AC. The weaponization is average value. It just doesn't answer. Concede that unfairness in this case is good. When privileged students move to top position at temporary unfair way, increases cognitive distance and offers an opportunity to change your perspectives on racial disparities. You should ask yourself, why preserve a fair model of debate if it's anti-black, it's a vacuous impact, and make them win the rest of the critique. The predictability offense, the role of the negative is not to provide app ground or tell you what you should have read in debate. That's just not how it works. If we win their form of politics and research practices anti-black, you should vote negative and just tell them to go back to the drawing board. Predictably, it's bad because it operates on a field of violence and move to innocence and weaponizes it against people who choose to shield the system. Even if we lose for if you vote negative, they get to win the app against an anti-counter argument. Our links beg the question if you should have adjudicated this debate in the first place. Their portable skills argument supercharges the debate anti-black argument because it proves that your skills are exported outside of anti-black, and we should refuse those research paradigms in the first place. Go to the framing arguments. There's the ontology debate. Top level framing for both libido economy and ontology arguments. They conceded the relativism decide. Just saying that you should overcorrect for your anti-black violence is not an answer. As for non-black clientele debating for a non-black judge, we have a pre-dialection to deny the existence of libido economy and refuse to think of black as ontological because our subject positions are rooted in the realm of contingency and think of such to show the very basis for a subjective placement. They have conceded you should overcorrect for your anti-black violence. After you line up the flows at the end of the 2 hour, you should, if you think of they have a way out, you should reject it. We have to know 100% the right before you vote out the libido economy debate proper. Only libido the economy can explain anti-black violence. The libido isn't proved experimentally. They've conceded the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. If you flip a coin 5 times and get head 5 times, it doesn't mean that tails never exist. The group bias argument flows negative says, quote, the boundaries of we and they are almost infinitely malleable as a change of part of social processes. We agree these are malleable. This malleability is always stuck in oscillation between phobia and feel that overdetermines our sentient relation. Now, they've conceded the block string that there's no coherent cause and effect, but you should value repeating schemas that prove its existence. They haven't answered any specific arguments. They just said it's a cause of political factors. One error is not disproven the existence of it. Just say that we haven't proven it. First is Officer Sherry Hall, who claims she was shot by a black man that never existed. Second is Diallo, shot 41 times in less than a minute. The arc of time from Black Codes to Jim Crow, the war on drugs, the election of Trump, all prove there's a libido undercoding that circulates anti-black violence. First, there's a persistent maneuver to relegate blacks to their argument. The pathologization argument about shifting blame to individuals is actually anti-black, saying we should hold individuals accountable for their anti-black violence is exactly the way white civil society coheres itself. Blackness, they've dropped all 3 pillars of ontology, not even answer answering. The first is, I'll go for gratuitous quantifies no rational explanation tied to no transgression law. It means why this not happens because of what Bacchus does, but who it is, which means that they can't have any political factor that explains their bias. They've dropped that winning example doesn't disagree with theory. All theories math lawyers issue a repetition made by finds that they've presided no examples. The permutation proper form overdetermines content. With the Levital economy objective, it proves that regardless of the material benefits of the plan, finds that research showing that no net benefit can overcome residual links because the choice between blackness and so it's not axiomatically pro. What does it mean to Bermuda model debate? The one error framing doesn't make one of the answers the wrong alt, and you shouldn't let the two ever contextualize. They conceded both links that serves as scholarship. They said to the their answer to immigration focused good is no trade-off, and that's not the link. Saying that you were negative state action is bullshit, but doesn't change the fact that the government is a positor of these rights. It creates a paradigm of a good immigrant, which legitimizes the three branches opposing the savior marginalism. This scenario planning link just good flat out job. See some point. There's a libido investment, the repetitive command to call upon the USF to do their act, crowds out burner of black suffering, and start of black radicalism, which ensures their model is saturated by anti-blacks that are recirculating debates, low crime, political focus. It's not a question of if these racial biases are malleable, but their research practices are anti-black. If you feel that top-down implementation is bad to the start of redemption, you vote negative.
We got
Hey, they said they're getting an error online.
What?
They said they're getting an error online.
Oh shoot. Really? Okay.
Vote out to end a policy that has codified ableism into the law for over a century. The public charge rule with the advent of ableism in the U.S. Only the act can solve it. The impact is twofold and goes conceded. First is material violence. Immigrants are denied life-saving medical benefits absent entry to the United States. Second is psychic violence. It creates modalities of exclusion that destroys values of life for immigrants at the border and traps them into an in-between and a limbo between life and death at the border. Framing issue for the rest of the debate. The negative has not contested act solvency at any point in this debate, which means the act is an instance of successful contingent policy that disproves the thesis of the critique, but I'll get to that on the K proper. They've also conceded the Reddick's evidence from the 1AC. Just the discussion of the content of the affirmative alone is sufficient for you to vote affirmative. Their model of debate ignores the plight of millions of immigrants who face life or death at the border. That is bad and locks in status quo oppression. Only the affirmative can solve that, which means that that's an independent reason to an affirmative framework. At the top of the K, we get to weigh the act, and the debate should be about the impact of the 1AC, not the research project. This is best for debate. First is education. Ace point is clash using the resolution as a praxis is the only way to ensure clash absent. The act could literally be anything. That makes nuanced discussion of the anti-black impossible because it relies on concessionary ground from the negative. They can define the affirmative as only being able to talk about the Cuban embargo, which is obviously bad for the affirmative because it makes it impossible for us to clash with the negative, which is our terminal impact. Visa point is predictability. It's good. We actually be able to know what is after on any other models. It subverts actual discussion and paper tautology. Third, it's visa point is precision. It internally turns all of their framework offense. Absent precision, it's impossible to describe meaning to the world and to determine future courses of action. That means that only our model of debate preserves the ability to debate itself. Diesel point is portable skills, advocacy, critical thinking are objectively good and not contested at any point in the round. Those are what we export, which means that we export goods versus skills. That is what our model of debate works. Second is fairness. First is ace point is participation. Cognitive dissonance goes our way. If you always lose, you just quit. You know, because less anti-black because you lost to an argument. I don't believe Spark is true just because I lost it, which the same logic applies and it hasn't been responded to by the negative. Political hope, the K proper. Political hope is good. The chain evidence folks. It's a meta-analysis of black students. It concludes that there's a positive correlation between hope and decreased suicidal ideation and mental health illnesses. It's like an actual study using quantitative data. Well, there's just a literature review and basically uses Sullivan's opinions about studies in general. You're right that he only uses one study, but it's an actual study with a scientific method. There's just an amalgamation of cherry picking. It doesn't even cite any studies really. It just asserts things about cruel optimism at the top. They've conceded that the federal government is inevitable. It's not it's no longer a question of if we should engage in it, but how. Anything else seems power to the alt-right and leaves Trump in power. That's true. It takes all of the radical negativity since it's not a viable option, but proves the desirability of the permutation. Permutation do both. The net benefit is the affirmative, even if they're right that it's a K of the model of debate. The two are compatible. We can agree that we live in an anti-black world, and that in theory the USFG should stop sterilizing immigrants. The two thoughts are not mutually exclusive. They've also conceded our theory of semiotics. If we win this, we win the debate of their links of the impact of the K itself relies on this notion of the little bit of economy that sutures the way the government acts in every instance. That's wrong. There's no way the K makes any sense. Society itself is malleable, then ontology is false. Their theory is non-falsifiable. It means that you just use parochial historical examples to justify causal link to the future. If people can be used for good, then so can the law. Our cards find contingency and the inapplicability of sweeping claims about the same. If we win that there's sweeping claims about how social stigmas embedded into the law will never change, that it proves the law can be used for the good. It denies that the law will ever co-opt their movements and it doesn't come up in the specificity of the act. That's the same as evidence. There was a reason we didn't answer your shotgun examples. They're infinitely aggressive and they just define the psyche in a different way to get out of it. If Trump decided to increase civil rights funding, they just say it was a phallic whiteness. If activists pass the civil rights movement, they just say they did it to prop up a system of white law. There's no way to verify what goes on inside someone's head or what compels them to do so. They've also dropped offense on the liberal economy quote. Their monolithic understanding of power flattens out distinctions and nuance and fractures coalition buildings. Internal link turns internal impact to the K. It makes radical negativity impossible and creates conditions for injustice by stripping us the political tools and agency to tackle material systems of injustice. That's Frazier. Look, they've dropped the Matthews evidence. It's fantastic on the question of racial bias. Cites a slew of scientific studies that demonstrate the unconscious attitudes that are static in their product and form culture, not a liberal trap. This makes all of their examples irrelevant. Their only answer was that they agree there's cognitive dissonance. That turns their ontology more into the proves that contingency is true. This all answers the overcorrection bias. Their argument relies on you having a liberal economy for you to believe there's a liberal economy. That's just as self-referential as you should have put the burden of proof in an argument that we can't even contest in the link debate. This largely biased the question of ontology stuff, but there's not one to begin with. The immigration focus link, we answered it. We never said there was a benevolent Washington that enshrines immigrants. The point of the affirmative is that we should tear those notions of good and bad immigrants all together since they're coded on the lines of productivity and unproductivity. This is a link turn since the act dismantles the entire system and dismantles the U.S. power over immigration in the first place. Their five heads versus tails argument makes no sense. It depends on you knowing that there's a coin to begin with. Look, you should vote affirmative because the AF is a good idea. We've presented a model of debate that allows them to access the critique and talk about anti-blackness, but you should still weigh the impacts of the affirmative. Additionally, they've dropped that just a discussion of the affirmative is good enough to win the debate because immigration, regardless of anti-blackness, is a salient issue that affects millions of people.
Cognitive dissonance takes out their ontology words, since it proves that we can change our biases.
Sure, and cognitive takes out their intelligent words as soon as it proves that we can change our biases.
I'm gonna test you.
This is not the kind of post. This is
It's fine.
Okay. That's not what you want to see.
Very good.
Can you grab your partners? Sorry.
Great.
While we're waiting for Natasha, I should probably know at this point, but who's who?
I'm sure it's.
And what? All right. Okay. I vote affirmative. I think that this debate is really close on a lot of issues, but gets very frustrating because I think that both sides get very caught up in winning central thesis arguments about anti-blackness without doing much in the way of interaction between how a lot of those arguments function versus a lot of the theories of the affirmative. I think that everybody is treating this as if it is a nebulous state action of just like state action versus anti-blackness, rather than anything specific to the AF's policies, specific to public charging, et cetera, which makes it very frustrating for both sides because I think that there could be a lot more capitalizing going on with both sides. I think that there's a lot of questions of disability, eugenics, productivity, dependency, immigration, all of which interact with anti-blackness in different ways. I don't think that this has to necessarily be some sort of like oppression Olympics debate, but just that these theories clearly interact. There's lots of good literature about how those interactions could or do occur, and I don't think either side is really taking advantage of that. I think ultimately, because of the lack of interaction of those theories, it ends up favoring the negative less than the affirmative because the affirmative gets permutations and they get the 8 minutes of offense in the 1AC to leverage against the alternative, which means that I think even if I grant, I think that the negative might be winning a few of these thesis level questions. I'm not really sure how that interacts with the actual impact of the affirmative. So I think that, like for instance, I'm down for the negatives framework interpretation in an abstract way, but I'm confused about how to justify it versus the AF specifically. Was the justification for the exclusion of AF scholarship not necessarily in terms of USFG policy, but just in terms of removing the public charge restriction? I understand that that means that there is a utility of the USFG, which is problematic, but I am unsure about why that interaction is problematic in terms of the public charge, not just in terms of anti-blackness. There needs to be some explanation of how they are not able to access or weigh their impacts, why the affirmative case is not able to resolve those things, aside from just anti-black violence. Or at least why anti-black violence specifically outweighs the impacts that they're weighing with the affirmative. And I think that that application is just not really happening. So then it begs the question of even if I think that in general USFG action is bad, what does that mean in terms of their specific application of it? There just needs to be more explanation here. I think that they're doing a decent job of explaining why, even if USFG action is problematic, that specific to the public charge restriction, that should be removed, which then begs the question of, does that mean that they have to defend the USFG in all instances? Can they win that a negative state action in one instance is good, and can be in some way combined with the alternative, even if it does co-opt portions of the alternative? Can that still be better than status quo? Because I think if they're winning that the app is net better than the status quo alone, then that drastically lowers the barrier for voting on the permutation. I think that they're not necessarily, I think that you're winning some kind of like arguments against the permutation, dissents to the permutation, which is like, for instance, the idea of co-opting black radicalism, your argument about, what was the other one? Your like white saviorism argument, etc. But I guess that still begs the question then of how do I evaluate those dissents to the permutation versus the impact of the affirmative? I don't think that there's much like quantitative explanation of how to weigh those against the affirmative. So I think that more work needs to be done there. I also think that even if you're winning those arguments, I'm not necessarily sure why that means that the permutation, even if it like does cause forms of anti-black violence, why is necessarily like, why the portions that I think that they're doing decent on, which is the contingency debate, and this idea of the, I guess, I don't know what to call it, but the this psychology debate that's happening about hope. I think that they're probably right that their card's a little bit better than yours on that point. I think the contingency debate gets a little bit wishy-washy just because I think that they're not answering some of your examples. I also think that their cards are asserting some theories that you're not directly responding to in the 2NR either. But because those get a little bit wishy-washy, it gives me some hesitation in thinking that the AF cannot do anything productive. And I think it's just in general because of that lack of application that makes me think that. I think that if this debate comes down to the block and the 2NR explaining either why anti-black violence causes, like for instance, causes forms of eugenic violence, or why anti-blackness is the explanation for why exclusions occur in the public charge system, why for instance, you talk about in cross-ex the theories of productivity that the app pushes forward. It seems to be pretty easy to formulate some interactions of why we value certain individuals based off of the idea of productivity, etc. But some of those interactions, then I think that you're in a really good spot in this 2NR, because I think on some technical aspects here, you're doing well. It's just hard for me to explain why the alternative alone outweighs the affirmative.
Is that the only argument that we have in the block that attempts to sort of capture the app's impacts? Are we not making arguments anywhere else as to how the alt solves the case?
I don't really think that. I think that the alternative is a good way of reorienting ourselves to the state. I don't think that there's the further explanation of after that reorientation. That means we're able to solve forms of violence that are not just anti-black violence, or why anti-black violence controls the app's violence. Because I think if you're winning either of those...
Or just the argument that the state is responsible for ableism.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. And are we also... Is there anywhere on the club where we're trying to short circuit the impact debate by making this about methodology or?
No, I do think that is happening. It's just, it's hard for me.
That's the question I have. I'm wondering how we're getting that app being waived.
Because it's hard for me to justify how, if I think that the app is like controlling the structure of how their impacts occur, then it's hard for me to explain a way in which the evaluation method of the negative is like preferable because it allows for massive forms of violence.
Is it possible?
Eugenic violence
Is it
to
possible
occur.
though that no one solves the app?
That's what I was asking.
I think I certainly think that's possible,
The argument
but
being
It
made
seems like
throughout-
that's kind of what we're going.
Well, the argument being made throughout is
Yeah.
that, and then voting for Peninsula doesn't do anything to change anything. But this is a debate about debate, not about like what the app resolves, because the app doesn't resolve anything.
I think that begs the question though of if the affirmative is like, I think that begs the question of there needs to be some sort of application of why, I think that you're winning why swaths of your offense about why they do not resolve anti-black violence. I think that then that needs to be explained in a way in which why not being able to resolve those structures also means that they are not able to solve other forms of violence. For instance, why that means that forms of violence like the public charge restriction are not then contingent structures that can be resolved, or why those are grounded or undergirded by anti-black violence. I think if that portion is not happening, then it's confusing to me how even if you're winning the framing debate, why, like, that makes it hard because to me that seems like just a giant dissad. If there is this large form of violence that you don't resolve.
Maybe that like it seems like you're couching those arguments with respect to the impact to the K as opposed to the impact to the app, right? Like, it seems like I could just ask the same question in reverse about the affirmative's impacts. What is it that the affirmative demonstrates? I mean, I get that they make this sort of discursive argument in the 2AC that discussion about the app is enough to sort of, mobilize us toward the impact, et cetera. But you didn't mention that. So I'm just wondering if that's, is that how they access their impacts?
Well, I think that portion of the discussion, to me at least, is not necessarily, perceptually to me in the 2NR is not necessarily being forefronted in terms of the disconnect between like their agency as debaters being able to create change and more so their epistemology being able to, how their epistemology affects anti-black structures.
Is that a big part of the 2AR for you?
I think that they're doing some pushback here, but I think you're right that there's not a ton of pushback by the affirmative as to why the affirmative like has a, I guess, form of methodology or epistemology that resolves the public charge in some sort of like discursive way. But I think that pushback is not happening as much in the 2NR either, because the 2NR seems to be a bit more focused on winning some of the structural claims of how power operates rather than the discursive arguments about their speech act.
Just in defense of the 2N, that's the internal link to the impact of the K, as opposed to this sort of nebulous claim that the affirmative is able to solve. Right, I guess from Het's perspective, if we can get to even on the case impact,